So what do Sonny Landreth, Joey Landreth, Ariel Posen, and myself all have in common? Well, for one, we're all slide players. So we all have that in common, but there's something else that those three guys and I do when we play slide that you may or may not have noticed. Did you catch that? I'll do it one more time. If you still couldn't see what was happening there, what I'm doing is playing slide notes and fretting notes behind the slide. Some people call this technique hybrid slide playing, which is a perfectly fine term, but I tend to call it fretting behind the slide. It's a technique that isn't new per se. I mean, Sonny Landreth has been doing it masterfully for decades, and I'm sure people were dabbling in it before him. But I would say in the last 5 to 10 years or so, fretting behind the slide has gone from being an extremely niche thing to coming out more in the forefront of slide playing and just guitar playing in general, particularly because of modern day masters like Joey Landreth and Ariel Posen, like I said. And while I'm sure a good majority of my YouTube subscribers know what fretting behind the slide is, there are still a lot of people out there who have no clue what this technique is. And I know that because I get messages and comments all the time asking, what is that you're doing with your fingers behind the slide? And so for today's video, I would like to just shed light on what fretting behind the slide is, what it can do for your playing, and give a quick little crash course on how to get started doing this technique. But before we get into the video, I have a huge announcement for you guys. My new video course, which is called the Slide Guitar Course Fretting Behind the Slide Edition, is out now. And both my new Fretting Behind the Slide course and my Standard Tuning Slide course are both going to be discounted at 55% off for the entire month of August. So what does my new course offer? Well, it has 6 hours worth of video lessons, as well as PDF downloads, tabs, Guitar Pro files, and custom-made backing tracks, all of which teach you everything you need to know to get started fretting behind the slide and eventually mastering this technique. The course starts out with the most basic fundamentals of fretting behind the slide, like just transitioning between a slide note to a fretted note and back, and gradually works its way up to more advanced techniques like fretting with multiple fingers behind the slide, arpeggios, fretting behind the slide with chords, and just generally incorporating this technique into a wide variety of situations. So who is this course for? Well, I would say that my Fretting Behind the Slide course is more of an intermediate to advanced level course. Now, I don't mean to scare anyone away. This course does make fretting behind the slide as approachable as possible, but you at least need to have some prior experience playing slide before taking this course in order to get the most out of it. If you're brand new to slide, then I would suggest you take a look at my Standard Tuning Edition slide course, because that one starts from absolute square one and teaches you the absolute basics of slide playing all the way up through playing more advanced stuff with just the slide by itself. And once you've taken that, then you can go take a look at the Fretting Behind the Slide course if you're brand new to slide. Like I said, both courses are on sale at 55% off for the entire month of August, so don't miss out. Go check out the link in the description down below to take a look at both of my courses. Thank you so much in advance to anyone who decides to buy either of my courses. It really is the main way that I'm able to support myself and continue being a musician and content creator full-time. So thank you. It truly means the world to me. By the way, I have my guitar tuned to standard tuning for this entire video. All right, so at this point we know what fretting behind the slide is. It's a hybrid slide guitar technique where we are incorporating both slide notes and fretted notes. But what is the point of it? Why would you want to do this fretting behind the slide technique? Well, in the most basic terms, it just adds a new dimension to your slide playing, and it allows you to kind of blur the line between normal fretted guitar playing and pure slide playing. It's somewhere in between, right? And there's a couple different ways you could look at this. For one, you can think of it as just kind of a way to spice up your normal guitar playing. So essentially a way to interject the slide into your normal fretted playing. So in that situation, you could be taking a solo, for example, just normally while you have the slide on like this. And then just quickly throw in a couple little slide lines and fretting behind the slide lines in there. That's one way to look at it. Another angle that you could look at it from, which is kind of more how I approach fretting behind the slide, is to think of it as an extension of your slide playing, so a more kind of slide-focused perspective. So from this perspective, you're mainly thinking of it as you're playing slide, but using fretting behind the slide to kind of bring some more dexterity and efficiency to your slide playing. Something like this, for example. So in that case, I'm mainly playing slide, but using fretting behind the slide as a tool to navigate parts of scales that might be kind of awkward to play with just the slide, and using it as a way to more efficiently and precisely get some faster lines into my slide playing, like this. If that's the idea that I want to play, but I try it with just the slide only, then it might go something like this. Which still works, it is doable, but it's harder to get it to sound good using just the slide, and my hand is physically moving a lot more in order to make that line happen with just the slide. Whereas the fretting behind the slide version like this, I had much better economy of motion with my hand when I did that version, and to me, it sounded cleaner and more precise. And so that's how fretting behind the slide can very much improve your dexterity while playing slide. And as long as you still are playing enough true slide lines like this, then you're not losing any of that soulfulness and expressiveness that the slide brings. It's just fretting behind the slide is giving you more options to add on top of that. So like I said, that's kind of more of the slide-focused perspective. But lastly, you can also look at this as a 50-50 blend of fretting and sliding. When you approach fretting behind the slide like that, it really becomes its own thing with its own sound and truly blurs the line between normal fretted playing and slide playing. Like I said, I tend to lean towards looking at it from a more slide-focused perspective, but whenever I'm soloing with fretting behind the slide, I do have moments where I also think of it from more of that kind of fretting-focused perspective and the 50-50 perspective. And so if you're able to get this technique down and kind of look at it from these different angles depending on the situation and what you're feeling, then like I said, fretting behind the slide just completely opens up a whole new world of possibilities for you in your guitar playing. So that's why someone might want to learn and incorporate fretting behind the slide into their guitar playing. So all of that's great, right? But how do you actually do this technique? Well, let's do a little crash course on how to get started with fretting behind the slide. So the first important thing is that I highly recommend that you wear the slide on your pinky finger. If you ask me, it is just by far the most versatile option, whether you're fretting behind the slide or not, just for playing slide in general, because it allows you to do so much more with fretting and playing chords and stuff when you're not trying to play slide. And specifically for fretting behind the slide, it gives you way more room to reach for notes behind the slide without having to contort your hand in these kind of awkward positions and potentially injure yourself. It just gives you much more range and flexibility with this technique, and it provides the most options for fretting fingers behind the slide. You get 3 fingers behind the slide rather than just 2 or 1. If you're a ring finger or middle finger slide guy, then I get it. It feels awkward putting it on your pinky finger. I was a ring finger guy for years before I finally switched to my pinky, and the transition was awkward, but it was absolutely worth it. Next, you want to make sure you have a slide that isn't too heavy and fits your finger well. So as you can see, my slide is very form-fitting, not too long, not too short, just right for my pinky, and it's going to make fretting behind the slide much, much easier because you need a lot of control over your pinky finger when you're doing this technique. Next, you need to make sure your slide hand positioning is correct. So what I would recommend is to have your thumb planted on the back of the neck at all times, so the center of the back of the neck, to give you the most stability and control. And you want to wear the slide so it gives your finger room to bend a little bit and move around. You don't want to push the slide all the way down so your finger has to stay stiff like that. You want it to stop around that second knuckle there so you can actually get some movement going on like that. And again, with your thumb on the back of the neck, just kind of bring the slide to the strings by gently bending your fingers, keeping your wrist nice and straight, having a nice relaxed, loose hand. You don't want to have your hand like this, or this, or this, or this, or this. None of those positions are going to give you good enough control and fluidity with your left hand. You need to have your hand in this kind of position pretty much at all times. Once you have your hand in the right position, now you can start trying to fret some notes behind the slide. So the main thing when it comes to fretting behind the slide with soloing specifically, when you're playing single notes at a time, is that whenever the slide is down playing notes, so whenever you're playing slide notes, you are not pushing down any strings with your fingers behind the slide. You can have them lightly resting on the strings behind the slide, but you're not actually pushing any strings to the frets while the slide is down on the strings. And then vice versa, whenever you are fretting notes behind the slide always is going to come up off of the strings a little bit when you're soloing playing single notes. When you're playing chords, it's a little bit different. We'll get to that in a minute. But when you're playing single notes behind the slide does not stay down on the string. So you don't want to do this. Hear how the string's rattling against the slide like that? That's because I'm trying to keep the slide down the whole time while I'm fretting this note behind the slide with my index finger. What you want to do instead is play a slide note and then play a fretted note, lifting the slide just a little bit off of the fretboard. You don't have to go all the way up here like this or anything. You just want to lift it off a little bit just to give that string room to vibrate while you're fretting the note behind the slide. Initially, when you're first trying out this technique, just go back and forth between two notes like that, 2 frets apart on any string. Go as slow as you need to, just back and forth until you're able to make both notes sound clean, and especially make that slide note when you go back to putting the slide down. You really want to make sure you can get that sounding clean, because it's kind of challenging at first to have to lift the slide away and then put it down at just the right amount of pressure to where you're not banging into the strings or the frets, but also not rattling the slide on the strings. So just work on getting both of those notes back to back sounding nice and clean. Once you can do that on one string, then go ahead and try it on all of the rest of the strings. So try it on like your high E, for example. That high E is going to be especially challenging because it's the thinnest string and takes the most precision to not fret out. And just try it on all your different strings, just different parts of the neck. Doesn't really matter where, like I said, just 2 frets apart. Just trying it in different areas of the neck on different strings, just to get a feel for it. Once you have the hang of that, then what you can do is try to play a scale with fretting behind the slide. So the first scale that I recommend everyone try out is just your normal A minor pentatonic scale. So for that, essentially you're just going to walk up the scale exactly like you normally would with fretting. Just your normal first position minor pentatonic. And when you're going up and down the scale, first take a look at which notes you fretted with your ring and pinky fingers. So in this case, it would be all of these notes here. So now when we play this with fretting behind the slide, those are going to be played with the slide. And then all of the notes that you played with your index finger before, which were all of these, those you're still going to play with your index finger. So that would go like this. You don't have to play it that fast at first, just start out nice and slow, paying attention to the low E string and B and high E strings, because for those, we have to actually kind of spread our fingers apart a little bit in order to fret behind the slide here. So that's what I'd recommend you do whenever you are playing any kind of wider interval like this. Just spread your fingers out a little bit in order to reach that higher up slide note there. I would suggest you don't do this where you keep your fingers together and make a jump like that. It's going to feel weird at first, but try to keep your fingers spread out like that so you're not having to move your hand as much. And just go nice and slow up and down that scale. If you need to, spend a little extra time on those spread position ones there, because it can be a little bit harder to control the slide when your pinky is just kind of out floating in the middle of nowhere compared to when you have your fingers more together like this. It's a little bit easier playing these closer together notes. And then once you can play that pentatonic scale up and down decently well, then the next thing I would suggest you try out is a little exercise that I came up with when I was first teaching myself how to fret behind the slide. The exercise is a 3-step process where you're going to start by coming up with a very short, simple lick without the slide. So maybe something like this. So just start out with something super simple and basic like that. Just come up with something on your own. Then try to play it with the slide only. So like this. Then lastly, try to play it with fretting behind the slide. So in this case, it would go like this. I'm using the same concept that I did for playing the pentatonic scale up and down, where whatever I played with my index finger before, I'm still going to fret that with my index finger. And then whatever I played with my ring finger in this case, I'm going to play with the slide now. So instead of, those two notes are now going to be, and then this note is still going to be fretted with my index finger. So. And that's it. That's the exercise. That right there is how I taught myself how to fret behind the slide. I just started out with the most basic normal fretted licks and then figured out how to adapt them with fretting behind the slide. As you do this exercise and get the hang of this technique more, you can start to make the licks more and more complex and challenging as you go. So like I said, your first lick that you try might be something very, very basic, but then you can move on to stuff that has a little bit more going on, like say this, then with the slide, then fretting behind the slide. Then you can step it up even more from there, like this. And so on. Gradually make the licks that you're trying out more and more difficult as you go, and try it out in different positions with different scales and so on. And this exercise is something you can do to practice and improve your fretting behind the slide no matter where you're at in your slide guitar journey. So that's all we're going to talk about when it comes to soloing in this video. That right there was a super condensed version of not even the first third of my new fretting behind the slide course. So if you want to go way more in detail with this stuff, then definitely check out the course. But now to finish off this video, let's talk about chords for a second. So when it comes to fretting behind the slide with chords, essentially all of the same basic fundamental stuff is going to apply, except for what I said about lifting the slide away from the strings when we're fretting notes. So all of our hand positioning and that stuff is going to stay the same, except now whenever we're fretting notes behind the slide, we're going to keep the slide down on the strings because, again, in order to play chords with the slide, we need to be playing slide notes and fretted notes at the same time. So instead of lifting the slide away, we're keeping the slide down while fretting notes. Now, to me, this is even more challenging than soloing with fretting behind the slide because in order to play notes behind the slide with chords, allowing those slide notes and the fretted notes to ring out without getting any kind of rattling or anything like that is a really, really delicate balance. You have to have a really delicate touch with the slide. You have to be very careful how you're fretting the notes behind the slide. You have to make sure you're not accidentally pushing other strings down. You have to be very precise with just coming in and fretting one note at a time. But regardless, how you can get started out with this is to just pick a little 3-string grouping. In this case, I'm in standard tuning, so I'm going to go with the D, G, and B strings. So this little major triad here. And I'm just going to put the slide at the 9th fret, so I'm just going to play those 3 strings only, playing an E major triad here. And just go ahead and try to fret the G string 2 frets below from where the slide is there. So you're going from that to this. So just the slide, and then fretting that G string 2 frets behind it. Practice going between those two. And especially when you're on that fretted one there, make sure you're able to get all 3 of those notes ringing out nice and clear. If you're pushing the slide down too hard, then it's probably going to sound like this. You get that rattle there. So you have to have just the right amount of touch to have the slide notes ring out clear, but not have the slide rattle against the string. And just try to go back and forth. You can try it on different strings too. You can try the B string at the same fret there. You can add in this high E string here. You can add different notes with different fingers, so you could go like, or you could even go, or. So you have tons of options in terms of what chords you can make with fretting behind the slide, but specifically which chords you can make is going to very much depend on the tuning that you're using. So like I said, I'm in standard tuning, so I'm going to have a certain specific kind of set of options there. But if you're using open D or open E or open G or things like that, then it's going to completely change. And so in order to kind of figure out what you can really do with it, it takes a little bit of music theory knowledge and a little bit of just prior chord knowledge in order to do it. And as long as you know a little bit about what you're doing with chords and intervals and things like that, then essentially what you can do is just kind of work your way through all of your different frets on your different string groupings and just kind of figure out, okay, what is this chord? Now what is that chord? What is this? Now what is this? What is this? Now what is this? What is this? What is this? And so on, just essentially systematically working your way up one string, one fret at a time, just seeing what adding different notes behind the slide does to each chord. Again, in my fretting behind the slide course, we go way more in depth with that, and we actually talk about specific chords and what you can do with them. But to get you started with it, just kind of take a look at what we talked about just there. Just experiment, try out some different notes behind the slide, and just kind of see what happens. And so that will do it for our fretting behind the slide crash course. Like I said, this is a very, very condensed version of what I have to offer in the fretting behind the slide course. And just in general, fretting behind the slide has so many possibilities for what you can do with it. It is a super exciting technique that I feel like has just barely been explored. As long as new guitar players continue to discover this technique, I feel like we're gonna have more and more people innovating with it and coming up with really cool, new, unique ways to use it. And yeah, I just think it's a super cool extension of slide playing that everyone should take a look at. Don't forget that my new fretting behind the slide course and my standard tuning slide course are both on sale for 55% off for the entire month of August. Link is in the description down below to go check both of those out. Thank you so much to everyone who supports me by purchasing my courses, and thank you for watching this video. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys have tried fretting behind the slide before and how you like to use it. If you could please like, comment, subscribe, and click the bell notification icon to get notified whenever I post new videos. Thank you guys again, and see you next time.